My name is Mark Levine. I'm the Executive Director of the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance and the Deputy Director of the New York State Association of Counties. And I am pleased today to host this webinar with Priority Power Management, Mega's technical consultant that helps local governments and our members best meet their energy supply needs. Today's webinar is about better understanding your electricity supply costs. Since New York deregulated its electricity market in the 1990s, municipalities, school districts, and other public entities have had the ability to choose their electricity supplier rather than relying on the utility's default rate. But making a good choice means understanding what you're actually paying for. This webinar breaks down the components that make up your electricity supply price, including energy, capacity, transmission, ancillary services, congestion, and compliance, and explains how each one affects what your organization pays. We'll also cover how fixed, variable, and hybrid pricing structures align with different risk tolerances and budgeting needs, and what to watch out for when reviewing a supplier contract, from broker fee disclosure to red flags like vague pricing or unfavorable auto renewal terms. Before we begin the presentation, I want to turn to Jeanette Stanziano, NISAC's Director of Education and Training, for some housekeeping comments. Jeanette.
Thank you, Mark. We will be recording this webinar and we will be posting it on Mega's website following this webinar. We want to encourage anyone that's on the call to submit any questions by referring to your questions tab and typing them in. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks. And could you advance to the first slide, Jeanette? I'm going to start this webinar with some background on Mega, and then I will turn it over to our panelists. Mega is a nonprofit local development corporation created by two counties in 1998, Tioga and Tompkins counties, to help them reduce energy costs when the state deregulated the energy supply market, which you will hear a little bit more about during this presentation. An active Mega member does a public bid that checks all the state's procurement requirements, and they pick the two suppliers, electricity and natural gas, that will provide the best prices and the best customer service for our members. We are here to serve you. We are governed by a board of directors made up of local officials, and they hold us to our mission to serve our members by achieving the most competitive prices for electricity and natural gas, to best minimize and stabilize the cost of energy, to help local governments, our members, so that you can provide the highest quality services for your constituents and clients, and to be a source of information and resources like this webinar to help you make sound energy policy decisions. Next slide, please. We partner closely with the New York State Association of Counties, as Mega was started by two counties and currently serves over 30 member counties. We work closely with the winners of our energy supply bids to ensure they are effectively serving our members: NRG for natural gas, Constellation for electricity. And we partner with a technical consultant, Priority Power Management, who helps us educate our members and provides them with advice that is in their best interest. And that brings us directly to our webinar today. Our panelists today come from Priority Power Management, Mega's technical consultant. David Weirs serves as the president for Target Markets and has over 25 years of experience in creating and delivering innovative solutions in the energy industry. David has participated in many deregulated markets from their inception and has advocated for electricity deregulation, representing third-party aggregator, broker, and consultant channels. Mr. Weirs has been involved with the MEGA program for over 12 years. Thanks for being with us, David. Our next panelist is David Weekly. He has more than 26 years experience in energy supply management, with 22 years working directly with energy supply companies. Over this period, he cultivated various workable solutions with consultant, ESCO, client relationships. He has a deep appreciation for associations like ours and their relationship with their energy supply companies. Brian Butters graduated from the University of Rochester with a degree in economics and soon settled in the Rochester area. He has over 26 years of experience in the upstate New York deregulated markets. He has had the opportunity to work directly with clients and now enjoys a more behind-the-scenes position as an analyst with Priority Power Management. David Weirs, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Jeanette. It's a pleasure to be here. Just want to go over a few things off the top, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion today. And when we look at goals, certainly by the end of this session, we want to provide a historical perspective of how electric and energy deregulation works in New York State, and what to look for when working with an energy supplier. So we will look at the basics of a restructured market, look at supply cost components, look at various pricing opportunities, and then red flags and best practices. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. So when we look at a historical view of an energy market, before deregulation, the graphic on the top right shows that it was a vertically integrated utility. And what does that mean? It means that the generation and the delivery to the customer were the same company, and that was regulated. So ultimately, there was a regulated return on investment. If the utility wanted to raise rates, they had to go to the Public Utility Commission or Public Service Commission and make a petition to do that. After deregulation in the 1990s, the supply portion was separated from delivery. So what does that mean? It means that ultimately there's no new lines or wires that are strung up to bring electricity to your municipality. That is still a regulated cost component. However, the supply piece was separate, and ultimately municipalities had the ability to choose their electricity supplier. So this presented opportunities, and it also presented risks, which we'll get into a little bit later. Next slide, please. Want to just take 30 seconds to go over the key players in the market. And you may have heard of these acronyms. You may be familiar with them, but I think it's important to set the stage. NYISO is the New York Independent System Operator, and this is a quasi-governmental agency that oversees power prices and the wholesale markets in New York State, ensuring that there are no blackouts or brownouts, and they keep the lights on. Going down the page further on the left-hand side, ESCO, Energy Services Companies, also called suppliers or alternative suppliers. These are licensed entities who compete to sell electricity to customers in New York State. They must be certified by the PSC, and ultimately, as Mark mentioned earlier, Constellation has been awarded the bid for MEGA on the electricity side, and NRG has been awarded the bid for MEGA on the natural gas side. Going to the top on the right side, your utility. So National Grid, if we go back one slide, please. National Grid, NYSEG, RG&E. This is the regulated component that still delivers the electricity to the municipalities. And ultimately, they're going to do that under a regulated structure. If you decide not to purchase through an alternative supplier or an ESCO, your utility makes sure that you have power and serves you on a default supply rate. And finally, the New York Public Service Commission. This is the governing body that oversees utilities, sets service rules, and all of the licensing in New York State. Next slide, please. So we'll look at expanded choice. As I mentioned, with choice comes potential for risk and how you can manage that risk. Customers now have the opportunity with deregulation to aggregate their purchasing. And so procurements like the mega and the public bid are options where they were not before. And as you couldn't tell, your relationship with the utility doesn't change. They still are obligated to provide power and deliver power to sites for your municipalities, and that doesn't change. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Weekly, and if we could advance into the supply rate. Go ahead, David.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Mark, for organizing this webinar. I appreciate it and look forward to answering any questions at the end. So as David mentioned, the supply components that make up, looking at your utility bill, and if you could advance it one slide, Mark, I appreciate it. So looking at your utility bill, it's broken up, as David mentioned, into two parts. The delivery portion is something that we're really not going to talk about too much today because it's something that we can't control. Those are set through the Public Service Commission and the utility. So those rates are set and very little we can do about those. The supply detail is something that we're going to be looking at in a little bit more detail, and Brian Butters is going to go into detail on each one of these components, but I just wanted to show the difference between supply and delivery. These are specifically the components that are attached to the supply detail. Now, whether you're a National Grid, NYSEG, or RG&E, there are two, sometimes they're on the same page, but most of the time, if you break out the supply detail, all of these components can be incorporated into one line item, or in some cases, your energy supply company may detail them a little bit differently. So it's good to just have an understanding of when we're talking about supply, these are the components that the energy supply companies are very familiar with when they go out to bid and on your behalf for the most competitive offer. We can just advance one more slide. So this is just kind of a simple pie chart as to referencing the percentages based off of how these components are made up. And the obvious is that the majority of the component is reflected with energy being the 70% of that. So the other components make up the rest of the piece, and they're not to be ignored, but the majority that takes up the most interest is the energy piece. And when your energy supply company is going out to bid, these are the components that will make up the bid stack for the supply contract. And as I mentioned, Brian Butters is going to go into detail on each one of these components, and I'll pass it off to Brian right now.
Thanks a lot, David. Next slide, please. All right, so starting right off the bat here, the energy, the commodity itself, the actual electrons, this is by far the largest piece of the puzzle here. And most importantly, it's the part of the rate that you have the most control over. So the way it all works is all the power companies, natural gas, nuclear, the wind farms, solar, Niagara Falls, all the power generation gets pushed into the NYISO. So they sell all their power into the grid. And then each hour that goes by, the NYISO uses that bid stack of pricing to set prices hour by hour. So like I say, it could be very, very volatile, particularly in the summertime when there's big draw, huge air conditioning load on the NYISO, prices are going to be higher. Same thing with the wintertime load. January, February, when the furnaces are pumping, you're going to have a lot of draw on the system, and prices are going to be high. In the fall and spring, when temperatures are gentle, not so much. So all the different components and prices are set up by the different fuels. And I want to touch specifically on natural gas. Natural gas is usually the price where the prices are clearing. About 50%, roughly speaking, about 50% of the generation using fuel is natural gas. I want to draw your attention over to the right-hand graph, and like I say, unlike the day-to-day and hour-to-hour NYISO clearing prices, this is showing the last 6 years of more like pricing trends. And I want to draw your attention to how volatile the market can get. This particular client, you're going to see there's 3 lines at the bottom of the graph. There's been 3 contracts that this particular client selected, and when they locked in, they must have been working with Mega, because they locked in about as perfect as you can get. I don't know how you could get much lower. If you look at the middle of the graph, you see that's 2022, and you'll see how high the prices went. And you see, I want to point this back to the natural gas. You say the reason that the prices were all so high, it just so happens that that's when pricing for natural gas had gone through a very, very high period. So when you have more expensive fuel, oftentimes you have more expensive electric. Say the way you can work with your with Mega and have them do their best to help you select the proper time to enter the market and do lock-in contracts. You can save yourself a lot of money. Next slide, please. Capacity. All right, so capacity is, you have less control over this, but you have some. So let's talk about it for a little bit. So capacity charges have to do with how much draw you pull from the grid. So the way the capacity, the ICAP is determined is on the single most busy day of the year. So that the day that the NYISO has to produce the absolute most amount of electricity is the peak day of the year. And what happens is they go back and they take a look at how much you used on that day. And for years and years and years and years, it didn't matter when you use it. It was just at any point during the year. And then a few years back, the peak day fell on a Saturday. So that didn't bode well. What happened there was a lot of commercial accounts were closed on Saturday. So they weren't using their fair share, their normal fair share of the market. So they didn't pay their fair share in the capacity market. So the NYISO decided, hey, we can't let this happen again. So they've changed the rules. And in an effort to make this the most fair for all participants, the peak day can only occur in July or August. It can't be on a weekend, and it can't be on a holiday. So, like I say, that's how the peak period is determined. The way that you can save yourself a little bit of money is if it looks like we're going to have a peak day, what you would want to do is minimize your usage on that day so that when the NYISO finds out how much power that you used on that day, it's minimized. I mean, that's if you use more, you pay more. So that seems fair. The July and August peak day your ICAP number is then reset in May the following year. So a peak day that happens this year, you won't see the new number until this following May 2027. Next slide, please. Transmission and ancillary, there's not much to talk about here. You really can't really do anything to adjust these costs. So transmission has to do with the amount of the great big superstructures that are bringing power from power plants to the grid itself, or not the grid, but the local lines. These huge lines and wires that are going across, that's the transmission. Ancillary services, it's essentially everything else in power. It's a lot of little tiny pieces. There's probably about 10 components. You never really see suppliers split those out. They're always rolled into the cost. So next slide, please. Line losses. Interesting. So you say every kWh that leaves a power plant doesn't arrive to the meter. So line losses are essentially the heat, the inefficiencies of the lines themselves. So as you push power through the lines, a certain amount of heat is generated through normal resistance, and those losses have to be accounted for. So approximately about 5, 6, 7% of the electrons that leave the power plants never make it to the meter. They're lost. So if someone's going to have 100 kWh go through your meter, the supplier has to buy 106 kWh or 107 kWh from the wholesale market in order to satisfy your load. So that's going to be rolled into the price. This is one of the places where a supplier or an unscrupulous person selling you a contract can kind of give you a gotcha, because they'll give you the rate and they won't disclose what the losses are, and they'll just say, oh, and plus losses, which they might say is next to nothing, but when it's about 5 to 7%, it adds up. So it's not something that can be ignored. Next slide, please. Clean Energy Standard, you might have heard it as CES. That is, so New York is wanting to be more and more green, and there's more and more green components going into the pricing every single year, it seems. Clean Energy Standard is designed, for lack of a better term, it's a subsidy. Like I say, we're subsidizing the green programs, and we're just putting it on the bill. Every year it seems to be a little bit more. If you can see the breakdown below, as we come from 2026 into 2030, the number seems to only go higher. One interesting cost, I think, is the PPT cost, the blue component. What that is primarily designed to do is you might have heard about the offshore wind projects outside of New York City, and PPT directly is in response to that. If you are very close to New York City, that PPT component is higher, and if you are in Buffalo and you're about as far away from New York City as you can get, that's quite a bit less. But it is a part of the fee, or part of the rate that we see constantly, and that is most often that's passed through many times. So it's just something to be aware of. And I think that's it for me. David Weekly, back to you, sir.
Thanks, Brian. As we look at all those components, we certainly don't have to be experts on all of that, and that's why Mega is as commissioned the trust in the partnerships that we have with Constellation and NRG, so that they can, have a clear understanding of when they go out to bid, all of those components are kind of wrapped into one. So these are when we're talking about pricing options, if we can go to the next slide, Mark, we'll go into a little bit more detail. So fixed rates right off the bat are, they're going to do, there's 3 options listed here. There certainly are more options, but these are the 3 main ones, the most popular ones, and the ones that you'll come in contact with most. So fixed price options are, right off the bat, they give us budget certainty, which is very important in associations like the municipalities and school districts and such. And budget certainty is certainly an important item. And in addition to budget certainty, Brian mentioned the risk that we can have with regard to the volatility of the market, where we saw electricity prices reach historic levels here earlier this year in February and March. So fixed price is going to mitigate the risk of the volatility of the market. Index rates, index and variable rates are also very popular. If the goal for members is to just beat the utility pricing, then the energy supply companies that you're going to work with are completely understanding and capable of delivering on that option as well. The risk there is that you're following a market that can be volatile. So that's something to be aware of. The hybrid is a blend of those two, obviously. So you have the optionality of converting a portion of your load to a fixed rate, while the remainder of that load floats at the variable rate. So all of these options, they're more of a tailored approach, and the more you can collaborate with your mega energy professional, the better off you guys are going to be able to strategize and pick the rate that most suits your energy supply goals and objectives. And like I said, these guys are professionals in the business. They've been around a long time. They know the questions to ask you. Feel comfortable asking the questions back to them as well, and have a better understanding of what your optionality is. So let's go on to the next slide. Red flags and best practices. All right, let's look at best practices right off the bat. So these are important, right? The best practices are going to give us the ability to have an understanding of what's in a contract. There's always been transparency between Mega and their members in understanding that there's some disclosure between what the levels of margin is on your contract. So having an understanding of price being one component, and it is a main component. However, there are other options, and there are other things to be aware of. Now, price being one of them. Contract language is very important as well, so that when you're looking at comparing an offer from a competing supplier, to know to dig into it a little bit, and that's where you're going to be able to lean on your energy professional from Mega, where you're going to be able to ask the vital questions about what's in a contract. There may be some volumetric restrictions that are tied into your contract that you might not be aware of, where they're assuming that you might use 2,000 decatherms in February, and what happens if you use 23% more than that? How is that going to affect your price? And that's important as well. We can go to the next slide. So here are the red flags. These are, unfortunately, there are some ESCOs out there that do not have your best interest. And thankfully, when Mega has partnered with Constellation and NRG, those guys are going to be able to feel comfortable. You guys, the members, are going to be able to feel real comfortable in being insulated from those questionable practices. And these are a few. They're not the only ones, unfortunately, but these are the ones that we see a lot of. And Brian mentioned a little bit about the vague pricing aspect of things, where your price may reflect one thing, but it may omit line losses or CES. And that's one thing that you want to be aware of. The other one is an auto renewal trap, where all of a sudden your contract comes up for renewal and you're out of contract, the fixed rate stops, and then you're flowing with that same energy supply company under a rate that you hadn't agreed to. So that is something to definitely be aware of, because that can be very costly. And a lot of those risks are mitigated by leaning on your trusted energy supply professional that Mega is partnered with, and they never want you to be out of contract. So they're going to be engaged with you throughout your term in your contract. The other thing that we see a lot of is teaser rates, where you might get an option from an energy supply company that says, we're going to give you a very attractive rate for 3 months. And then after that, you're subject to however they're going to align a supply rate for you at that time. And that's always something to watch out for. So, the theme of this call is just to really continue to be engaged with your energy professional that you have with Mega, and you'll be on the right path, because they're very capable. They've been in the business for a very long time, and Mega has partnered with 2 very good energy supply companies in NRG and Constellation. So I'll turn this back over to David Weirs, where he's got some takeaways, and I think we're going to have the opportunity to perhaps get to some of the questions that you might have afterwards. So thanks so much.
Thank you, David. Just wanted to go over again the top 3 things. Deregulation, as mentioned, really gives municipalities the power to control their destiny. So instead of just being a price taker with the utility, you can make a decision. By working with the Mega professional, you're going to make sure that you make the right decision in terms of contracting with an ESCO, and put your municipality in the best position to be successful in managing that cost. Supply cost has many components, what's included and what's not. And certainly as part of the Mega bid and awarding to those supply partners, Mega has its members and best interests in mind to make sure they know what they're getting when they sign a contract. Lots of other competitors in the marketplace don't have that same mindset. And then third, ask before you sign. Certainly, there are lots of times that we are working with clients and members on a one-on-one basis, where they say, we may get this bid from a different supplier. How does the Mega bid compare to that? And we certainly work with our members and participants to ensure they're getting what they think that they're getting out of this transaction. So next slide, Mark, I will turn it back to you and see if there's any questions from the audience that we can answer.
Great. Thank you, David, and Brian. I do have a couple of questions here, but I want to encourage the folks that are on the call to please submit any questions that you might have in your questions module on the GoToWebinar template. This has been a really good webinar. You know, we've had hundreds of meetings with school districts and local governments over the past 3 years. We get all kinds of great questions. This is a webinar where we were able to cover a lot of those questions in a short period of time. So I thank you for bringing your expertise and time on this. So again, please ask some questions. The first one is a good one, and we get it quite a bit. So how can the index variable rates beat the utility rate if they are buying from the same wholesale market? Sometimes I know how to answer this question, sometimes I don't. But David Weirs, can you take a stab at it right now?
Sure. Maybe I'll defer. Brian, you want to take this?
Actually, yeah, I don't mind taking a stab at this. The main reason has a lot to do with the clientele. The utility has to provide pricing to every single meter that's in their under their district, whether they pay their bills or whether they don't. And some have really terrible load shapes, and you could say they're very inefficient loads. Larger contracts, like municipalities, for example, school districts, they have a much more predictable load, and the suppliers are able to make a more efficient price, and that will often beat the utility.
Yep. The credit risk has a big deal. It's normalized under the utility model and averaged across the entire utility base, whereas suppliers on a one-off basis, and certainly through the MEGA program, based on the nature of the credit, don't get normalized.
Does the day-ahead purchasing on the day-ahead market make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. There are options buying day-ahead power or buying real-time power, and the difference between day-ahead power and real-time power are exactly what it sounds like. Real-time is just hour to hour, whereas the day-ahead pricing is published the day ahead. And so ultimately, if you think about it, if we have very volatile times, whether it's in the summer approaching peak demand, or whether it's in winter with very, very cold days, that's where you can see the real-time market run up. Now, conversely, there are times where the day-ahead market is published, and it's, let's just say it's forecasted to be 95 degrees with 100% humidity, and it only turns out to be 90 degrees, and a cloud cover comes in and there's a little bit less humidity. Well, in that scenario, the day-ahead pricing may be slightly higher, but usually what we see over the course of an extended time period is, in events of scarcity, the market will run more on the real-time pricing than the day-ahead pricing.
And I can just add really quickly to that. In New York markets, the suppliers are automatically going to assume that you're talking about day ahead versus real time. So the default is day ahead in New York usually.
Great, thank you very much. For a typical municipality, how much control do they really have over their capacity costs, and what are the most effective actions they could take to reduce those costs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are some things that municipalities can do in managing, this is what we call managing their capacity tag. And ultimately, if a municipality can reduce its consumption during that peak day, then it will see the benefits the following year. And so ultimately, we don't know exactly when that peak day is going to occur, but we have multiple analysts that are crunching data and making decisions in terms of this is going to be the peak day. And so ultimately, trying to reduce consumption during peak times will lead, if successful, will lead to lower cost alternatives on a going forward basis. Just like Brian said on the capacity slide, that peak day occurs in July or August during the weekdays, and ultimately that capacity value is set then beginning the following May. Great question.
Constellation is going to have tools as well to alert their members and their customers to a potential event that may happen, and give the members an opportunity to curtail their load on that day as well. So there are tools in place to alert the members of that. So they're completely capable of doing that.
Great, thank you. What market indicators do you watch when deciding whether it's a good time to lock in a fixed price? And I'll tell you right now, the volatility, this is a question we're getting from a number of our members who are up for renewal in the next 5 months, and they are looking at what's happening globally and locally and trying to figure out when to lock in. So what indicators should they be looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So certainly the fundamental and technical factors that determine where energy markets are going is an important piece. Simple, starting with simple supply and demand. And I'm sure that everyone on this call has heard about and has read about and continues to see in the news the data center phasing that we're in, where more and more data centers are attempting to be built and interconnected and are pulling the draw on the utility grid. And so as that demand increases, assuming supply stays the same, that's going to increase prices. Looking at the short term, what are the short-term weather forecasts? How much natural gas do we have in storage? As Brian mentioned earlier, natural gas is kind of on the margin, is on the marginal cost curve for electricity. So when we need another kilowatt hour of electricity generated, we usually call on a natural gas plant to provide that. So those are some of the technical and fundamental factors that our analysts internally look at. Constellation NRG has their own predictive analysis and their own models, and ultimately we're looking at historical data, but also looking at predictive analytics to determine if this happens and this happens and these variables, where do we see those prices going? Those are all things that we put in the soup to look at what the potential outcomes could be when participants are evaluating offers.
Hello, Sandy. I see that your hand is raised. Do you have a question for our panelists? All right, we'll move along to the next question here. If energy prices drop significantly after signing a fixed price contract, how should our local officials or school officials evaluate whether the decision was still successful or beneficial?
Great question as well. Ultimately, it depends on the time frame that you're looking at. We know that there will always be volatility, and going back to the energy chart that Brian spoke to, there will continue to be volatility in the energy market. Ultimately, there will be sometimes, if you do a fixed price, there will likely be sometimes over the current contract that spot market price is lower than the price that's locked in. You do have some options. You could look at what's called the blend and extend, where you extend the contract at a lower rate if that were to happen. But you are protected, obviously, when you do see those spikes on the upside. So again, it goes back to the goals and looking at the different product structures that David Weekley went over. Is budget certainty the most important thing? Or is getting the lowest price over a certain time frame the first and foremost, no matter if you go above budget for these 5 months and then below budget for these next 6 months? So really identifying what the goals are for each individual municipality, school district, participant will help define what's the correct product structure for that individual member.
That's a great answer. I appreciate that answer very much because it's not always intuitive. So for those who are on this webinar, having a conversation with your folks at Mega and or Priority Power and Energy Next or NRG or Constellation, that will be very helpful in determining which direction to go as you're locking in your rate. I have one more question, and again, I encourage anybody on the line right now, if you have another, please drop it in, or you can reach out to us if you have a question after this presentation. How much variation do you typically see in broker fees, and what should municipalities consider when evaluating whether those fees are justified?
Yeah, great question. And we certainly working with Mega participants, we get some of these questions from the participants. And really before 2024, I'm not sure that everyone was aware that brokers were putting margin on deals. The PSC passed a law that requires that now. And so Mega has always been transparent with any fees. Again, there's no cost to join Mega, and all of the fees are transparent through our bid process and awarding of the bid to either Constellation or NRG. That being said, there can be significant variation. We've seen when we review contracts now on behalf of clients or opportunities, the mega fee is listed and the supplier fees are listed, and many times the brokerage fees that some other brokers are charging are sometimes 3 times what the mega program fee is. So that is there certainly can be variations in that, and that is something that your mega representatives will help point out to you if you're looking at a bid from another organization. We can certainly point to that and show you exactly where that is. And that, I think that's been really helpful for customers in New York State because it's increased the transparency and it's given more information to the decision makers who need it to make the best decision for their organization.
Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to thank our speakers, David Weirs, David Weekley, and Brian Butters, for sharing their time, their expertise, and practical insights with us today. We appreciate the work they are doing to help our local governments and school districts better understand today's energy markets. I also want to thank all of you for joining us and for the important work that you do every day on behalf of your communities. At Mega, Mega's mission is to provide energy experience that will help local leaders make better informed decisions. We hope today's discussion has been helpful and that you leave with some ideas and resources that can help you make more informed energy decisions. Thank you again for being with us, and I wish you all a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.